But I think and hope that it's clear that what we're talking about now isn't just something that we do additionally with the rest of our spiritual work, but that it literally is the focus of our lives. And that doesn't mean we have to put aside everything else that we do, because we can do many things, but as long as the focus remains this. There's a story that I'd like to share. It's one of my favorite stories. There were two great Kabbalists, and they were both getting older, and they made a pact between them. And they agreed amongst themselves that whichever one of them would pass away first, he would come back and tell the other one what had happened to him in the next world. So one of these Kabbalists passes away, and his friend waits. He waits a week, he waits a month, he waits a few months, and he's getting worried. Why hasn't his friend come back to him in a vision, in a dream, one form or the other, to tell him what had happened to him? So he goes to the son of this great Kabbalist, and he tells him the whole story. He tells him of the pact that they had between them, and he tells them that he began to worry, that he hadn't seen his friend come back to him, so he doesn't know what happened to him in the next world. He knew that if possible, his friend would have come back to him. So the son looks at the friend of his father, and he says, I want you to know that I myself was also concerned why my father had not come back to me, whether in a vision or in a dream, to tell me what had happened to him. So, as the Kabbalists know to do, he did what is called a raising of his soul. They are able to literally take their soul and elevate it to the upper worlds. And I went up to the upper worlds, and I walked around there, and I asked the people there, have you seen my father? Have you seen my father? And I walk, and I reach a certain group of people, and they tell me, yes, your father was here, but he continued walking. And I go and I walk on the path that they showed me my father had walked, and I reach another group of people, and I say, have you seen my father? And they tell me, yes, we've seen your father, he was here, but then he continued walking. And this goes on, and I'm walking, and I'm walking, and suddenly I reach a group of people in front of a huge forest, a dark forest, and I ask them, have you seen my father? And they say, yes, your father was here, but he went through the forest. And I was a little frightened, but I went in his path, and I continued walking through the forest. And I come to the end of the forest, and I see my father, and he's standing there on a cane in front of a huge ocean. And I see that he's just focusing and looking at that ocean, not doing anything else. And I come up to my father, and I say, you know, we're concerned about you. We didn't know what happened to you. Why didn't you come back to us? So he says to me, the son says, he says, do you know what this ocean is? And I say, no, what is it? He says, this is the ocean of tears, of everybody in the world that has ever cried from pain. This ocean is filled with those tears. And I swore to the Creator that I will never leave this ocean until the tears are all dried up. And this, you know, and I hope for all of us, you know, when I hear this story, this is something that we, every single one of us, you know, one of the things about Kabbalah that is different maybe than other spiritual paths is that it's very democratic. You know, there isn't a hierarchy of, you know, people spiritual, you know, obviously there are people with more information than others, but there isn't somebody who you need to connect to in order to connect to the Creator. Every single one of us, the goal of every single one of us, hopefully, is to become that spiritual giant. And in order to do that, the first step is to take upon ourselves that I, you, every single one of us, will do everything we can to dry up the tears of every person. And you know, one of the things that Kabbalah teaches is that not necessarily is that everything that we believe in will happen, but certainly what we don't have a consciousness for will not happen. And if we do not take upon ourselves as a first step at least, to make it our goal in life, to see the pain and suffering that is out there, and to do everything that we can to make it stop, we cannot become God. More importantly than that, we cannot achieve our spiritual potential. We talk about, you know, the image of God, we talk about that potential that every single one of us has. If we do not make the focus of our lives to removal of pain and suffering for the world, we can be very spiritual people and we can do positive things, but if that is not the focus of our lives, we cannot become God, and more importantly, we cannot achieve the potential that we have. There's one other story in this realm, you know, one of the things about stories, especially, you know, true and ancient stories, and for me, I can say at least that it's not simply the information that it has, but the energy that it has within it. And I often go back to stories as often as I can, because again, these are stories from tremendous spiritual giants, and the story, besides the information that it gives over, it also gives us of their energy. And this is one of my favorite stories. The story is, there was a great Kabbalist, his name is Mendel of Rimanov, and one of his students came to him. And he came to him, he was crying, his son was deathly ill, and the doctors had given up hope on him. And he comes to his master, to his spiritual guide, and he says, is there anything that you can do? Can you pray for him? Can you bless him? So the master meditates and prays and meditates again for hours, literally for hours. And he sees that unfortunately the gates of heaven are closed. There is nothing that he can do to assist, to help the child. So he turns to the father. Of course, he's broken and the father is broken. And he says, I'm sorry. My prayers, my meditation, they can't accomplish it. The gates are closed. The father, of course, is broken. He gets back on his horse. He's driving back home. And he's traveling for maybe a half an hour. And suddenly he sees behind him a horse driving quickly. He's getting a little excited. Maybe it's his master. Maybe there is actually something that his master can do. And he turns around and he sees that it's his master on his horse. He stops by the side of the road and waits for his master to come by. And his master catches up with him, and he says, you know, after you left, you know, I realized that although I can't pray for you and for your son and help you, the least I can do is cry with you. And they sat down on the side of the road together and they cried. And the story actually ends that this child, through the crying of the father and the master, was healed. But the more important lesson for us, hopefully, for those of us who really want to become God, is that there is never a time when our sharing and caring for the other person ends. The master realized for himself and for us that even at times when we cannot necessarily help, we can cry with other people. And the important thing, again, you know, there are different lessons for different people. Different people have different sort of goals in their spiritual development for their spiritual life. But if we run to accomplish becoming God, and that means, and you know, it's one of those things that sometimes I'm a little sort of, I don't know if the word is scared, but a little apprehensive of talking about, because it seems so fantastic. But it is true. It's not easy, but it's true. And the first and most important point, and it's one of those things, again, you can't talk on for too long. You either get it or you don't. And it's about focusing our lives on this concept. And this is what separates, as they say, you know, not the men from the boys, but the spiritual giants from those of us who are simply spiritual. Somebody who makes his life focus, all his energy is put into this to end the pain and suffering.